Today we're going to talk about how the U.S. government made pilots too embarrassed to admit they'd seen UFOs. This is an article today from Slate. So, over the Super Bowl weekend, the U.S. shot down at least 3 UFOs, or as they're now called, UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. But we're not using that term. It's still UFOs. We keep it classic like the old Coke. That was the first spot. Oh, the first was spotted over Alaska, and the second over Canada. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Joe Biden agreed on the action. A third was downed over Lake Huron. So that's multi countries working together to shoot down UFOs. Again, that doesn't mean those are aliens. Let's keep it clear. It just means they don't know what's in the sky, but they are agreeing to shoot it out of the sky, which is all right. A segment about one of the objects features a CNN segment about one of the objects features a common refrain that, quote, not even the pilots could identify what they saw, unquote, largely because the UFO had no visible means of staying airborne. So they didn't even know how it's flying. They can't even tell you. But the good news is that pilots felt comfortable saying something, which has not always been the case. Quote, I didn't say anything out of fear I'd get fired, says an anonymous airline pilot in the new Nat Geo docuseries UFOs, investigating the unknown. Which is probably good. I don't know. I haven't seen it. Which premieres Monday. Oh, well, that's why I haven't seen it. I'm about to say, I never heard of it, but I guess it's a new thing. So the story goes for countless people. So the story goes for countless people, from civilians to military pilots, who have reported seeing UFOs. The moral of the story: if you see something, do not say something. Which makes sense. You see, he said he didn't want to get fired because before, if you thought you saw something like that and you reported it, they're gonna see you as like, oh, this guy's a nut job. We can't trust him. He's obviously tripping somehow. So it was systematically frowned upon for the people who are most likely to see it and have credible sources, right? It's one thing for some people who live in the middle of nowhere and see something flying and they don't know what to call it, so they just call it aliens. It seems like the most logical thing if you don't know nothing else, right? But what happens? You can't really say that to people that fly every day for a living, because now you sound crazy to tell them that they don't know what they're talking about. Well, they know a little bit more than the average person, right? So the latest government UFO report, published in January, identifies roughly half of catalog sightings as balloons, drones, or quote-unquote clutter, but many remain unidentified and unexplained. That's the thing right there. Unidentified is one thing. Unexplained is a whole other thing. What you mean unexplained? You don't even have no idea of what it could be? That's crazy. The report also notes that the number of UFO sightings, please. We're not gonna get sucked into the word propagandas. Nah. It's UFO. Don't try to change it now because now you think it's something bigger. Nah. UFO sightings has increased in recent years, in part because of reduced stigma surrounding those sightings. Exactly. They built the stigma and now are saying like, okay. It's not as crazy as we thought, or as we were saying, not thought, as they were saying. The report also notes that the number of right because of reduced stigma. One might wonder how UFO sightings became so stigmatized in the first place, and why. Unidentified objects in the sky don't have to be of extraterrestrial origin to pose risk to aviation or to national security. Exactly. Calling it aliens or how you say, overgeneralizing it, saying, oh, they must be crazy if they believe in aliens with no evidence. It makes it makes this it leaves it takes away the imagination, or not the imagination, but takes away the seriousness that it could possibly be something that, just because we don't know what it is doesn't mean that something wasn't there and it could be a threat to our security or safety, or to other pilots. And I'll say safety, I don't mean, it could be a different country. I just mean it could be something large enough to be seen by someone on the ground and could be in the way of planes, right? So that's dangerous for people on planes. That's not even no national security, No, it's just if you flying somewhere, you want to make sure that they know everything that's up there. They can see everything up there. So yeah, for sure. It makes sense to report sightings so the government can investigate them and address potential dangers. But for decades, the government has done the opposite, creating and codifying a policy of stigma to deter reports of sightings and to avoid acknowledging how much it didn't know. So now they're like, oh, we didn't even know. They were pretending, always pretending. Obviously, some things are understandably secrets. Like, if they're working on top secret new types of jets and things of that nature, stealth jets, they don't want to just come out and say like, oh yeah, you saw those jets? You saw them? Oh man, we was trying to hide them. Damn, I can't believe you. Are you sure you saw them? Because they're supposed to be stealth jets, and if you saw them, then it's not very stealth. That's funny. So, investigative journalist Leslie Kean, who features in the Nat Geo series, co-wrote a 2017 New York Times article that reverberated throughout the internet like a thunderbolt. It revealed that the government's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program had continued to investigate UFO sightings despite the Defense Department saying it stopped doing so in 2012. So that's the thing. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program started in 2007, but didn't get funded until 2010, and then they stopped it in 2012. But here they're saying like, no, they just told the public they stopped at 2012. Well, they kept investigating, which is cool, you know. Which is cool, you know. But what's not cool is them saying like, no, yeah, we matter of fact, we closed it up. We're not even spending money on it no more. And all the while they've been doing that, and that's not cool because like the people want to know, and if it's obviously where you can identify it, that means it's something more than just, you know, a possible threat. So hiding information from its people is never really a good thing. So yeah, okay. So back to the article. The article also contained footage of a 30-second video that the DoD had been sitting on since 2004, which shows two Navy jets interacting with a UFO near San Diego and captures the pilot's stunned and fascinated reactions. I think that was part of the video we saw, the last video. So imagine being one of those military pilots, knowing you'd seen a mysterious object that was potentially dangerous. Well, potentially, you don't know, because it's mysterious, I guess by definition, it's potentially dangerous, right? Anything you don't know, it's by definition potentially dangerous. Sure. So incredibly technologically advanced and very much worth investigating. Imagine never having seen an aircraft, military or otherwise, maneuver with such speed and dexterity. Imagine not being able to talk about it for 13 years, knowing you'd be ridiculed or perhaps fired if you did. Like that's the problem. Like at least let them talk about it, right? You bring it up. Hey, you saw this? Yeah, we seen this, and then just catalog it. You don't have to demean nobody. I would prefer they would have just done it some anonymous thing, and obviously if it's internal, then it's not. It's obviously credible people because these are your pilots. Like if you don't trust the pilots that you have out there, then who are you gonna trust, right? So, okay, boom. Back to the article. The U.S. government deliberately cultivated stigma. I'm gonna read that line again because if that's what the truth is. The U.S. government deliberately cultivated stigma related to UFO sightings during the Cold War. An uptick in reports in 1947 spurred the creation of the first official UFO investigation, Project Sign. A few months later, after it became clear that the Air Force couldn't handle the number of reports coming in, it hired a scientist, J. Allen Hynek, to evaluate the information. Hynek couldn't explain roughly 20% of the cases he looked at, but the Air Force didn't want to probe further. That's not a good thing. They said, what? 1 out of every 5 you can't even explain? All right, pack it up, boy. Let's get out of here. That's like being afraid of the dark, and if you're hearing a noise and saying, you know what, let's not even check that out. I know it's only me in this house, but I'm not checking that out. I'm just gonna go to sleep. That's not okay. That's not okay. But all right. So back to the article. Quote, it was a different world then, and the government was worried that the Russians would take advantage of UFO reports, Keane told them in a phone interview, a foreign enemy could exploit reports that to clog up the communication pipeline, sow confusion, and act as a decoy for action elsewhere. Which is, you know what? Okay, that's fair. I understand that. You know, I understand it. No. When you say it like that, that is fair. If another country was looking and seeing the government freaking out over UFOs, just creating some type of, you know, hoopla, kerfuffle around there, could definitely be used as a decoy, as a distraction, you know, for other countries to do what they really want to do. You know, that's a strong logic. I understand it. I'll allow it. I don't know if I'm okay with it, but I respect it. I don't know if I respect it, but I understand it at least. You know, no matter, at the very least, I understand it. I think it's a strong logic. So, where were we? Elsewhere, the U.S. also didn't want to admit that it couldn't explain some of. See, that's which would diminish its quote, which would quote diminish it as a powerful force. See, that's the point where it's like, okay, that's ego. That's not necessarily, you know, logic. That's just emotional ego, and that's really the main reason. The other stuff is like, oh yeah, and what if another country da. Their main reason was that part. It would diminish us as a powerful force. Shut up. We spend more than other countries' GDP on just the military. Relax. We'd be alright. These days, similar concerns existing regarding China, especially after the recent spy balloon fiasco. The Air Force then launched a follow-up called Project Grudge, whose mission was exactly what the name suggests, to explicitly dismiss and debunk the UFO issues, which is fine. Like, they should do that. Go through every one of them and explain it. Like, okay, look, this is just a balloon. Look at the pictures here. Look at the, you know, whatever, radar. We can undeniably prove that this is not something that we don't know what it is, right? And that's I think that's a good thing. However, sightings kept coming in. In 1952, a year that saw hundreds of UFO sightings, most notably in Washington, D.C., the government began Project Blue Book, yet another project designed to address the mounting UFO sightings, not by proper investigation, but by convenient explanation. And that's, again, that's the ego, emotional explaining away. This is not necessarily trying to find the right answer. It's just to hush up, like, oh, shut up. It's going to make us look weak against other countries or whatever, our enemies, whatever. That's whack. Project, okay, where were we? The CIA then formed a panel of experts to review the 6 years' worth of sightings documented by Project Blue Book. After meeting for roughly 12 hours, the panel said the evidence revealed nothing worthy of further study. Get out of here. There's no way. There was 6 years and hundreds of reporting, and they said, you know what? In 12 hours, they said, yeah, there's nothing to see here. Pack it up. We'll be all right. No, that's not no way. If you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you. The government slammed the door shut on UFO investigations. Quote, if you missed it, you don't have to face it. That is not, if you just miss it, you don't have to face it. Exactly. Whereas, like, I hear that noise, but I'm not going to go check that out. I'm all right. Unless they kick this door in, we're going to be all right. Let them take everything from the living room. As long as they don't kick my bedroom door in, we all right. It's like they weren't even here. That's not... Whatever. That's funny, but that's horrifying. The result was no surprise, because the panel's true goal was never to investigate the sightings. Instead, as its report makes clear, its mission was to debunk with the aim of reducing public interest in flying saucers. The panel also suggests that, quote, this education could be accomplished by mass media such as television, motion picture, and popular articles. Those sentences solidify a policy of what Keane calls sanctioned ridicule, right? That's like that's propaganda, right? Where they know they can control television, movies, and popular articles to make the people believe that, oh, if you believe this, then you must be crazy. If you think you saw this, you must be losing your mind. And you force it. They're still doing this just with different with whatever topic they want. So if you watch, if you get all your information from TV shows and movies and popular articles, not necessarily evidence-based things where you take a bunch of different articles and try to find the truth, then you probably are misinformed deliberately in a bunch of different areas of life. We're not gonna get into that today, but you know, your best bet is to read articles not like this, but this one, like not this one specifically, obviously this one because this one's from Slate, and others, right? You can't just take one article and think, oh, I know everything because I'll listen to the one thing. No, just like how they made reports of, they talked about Project Blue Book and things of that nature. Like, our jobs is to dig deep into that and compile a bunch of sources together and find the truth within it, right? Like looking up historical anything that happened in history. If you get everything from one source, you're gonna be misinformed. And sometimes it's deliberate, sometimes it's just, you know, not having all the information. So, yeah. Back to the article. The result was no surprise because the panel's true goal was never to investigate this. Okay, we said that. Project Blue Book continued until 1969, and as its leading debunker, Hynek offered often ridiculous or insulting explanation, such as suggesting that a mass sighting in Michigan was really just, quote, swamp gas. An explanation then President Gerald Ford called out as unsatisfactory and flippant. Listen, when the President Ford is like, that sounds, you trying to play me? Like, what? That sounds crazy. You sound like you're trying to play me. Flippant. That's the word. Like, you don't care. Like, you don't care if we even, don't agree with that. And they didn't, because there was no place to voice your discourse, right? Now you have like Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Now you can just, as soon as you feel something, you can just put it online. And if people agree, you see them. People disagree, you see them. Great. Everyone is able to do that at the same time today. Back then, you couldn't do that, right? All you could do is tell someone near you, call somebody, right? Look out your window, and whoever's there, you can talk to them about it. But at that time, that's it. That doesn't matter if the people, in power. So by then, it had been 20 years since the government began stigmatizing and belittling people who made UFO reports. Once a stigma is firmly rooted in the culture, it's much harder to get rid of, Keene said. The specific flavor of the stigma depends on the particular debunking explanation. Bonkers, drunk, bored, dreaming, sleepwalking. But people who report seeing UFOs are still sometimes considered crackpots. The kind of people who'd storm Area 51, which is hilarious. I remember that meme happening. That was really funny. So the government leveraged the fallacious association between UFOs and aliens to increase the stigma. But it's important to remember that UFO doesn't mean spaceship or something extraterrestrial origin. The term contains no such assertion. Rather, it means the object or phenomenon cannot yet be identified. That's it. You look up and you go, what's that? That's the UFO, because you don't know what it is. It's unidentified. It's in the air, so it's flying, and it's an object, apparently, that you can see. That's it. There's no something that came from Mars specifically, No, come on. Conflating UFO sightings with laughable suggestions of little green men was another debunking and dismissing tactic, even though that association did nothing to address potential safety and or security concerns. Those who reported sightings, including commercial airline pilots, military pilots, and civilians, grew angry at the governmental gaslighting and its unwillingness to properly investigate. After the conclusions of Project Blue Book, Hynek got mad too. He advocated for real scientific inquiry into UFO cases and became a vocal critic of the government's handling of UFOs and of its policy of ridicule. See, that's the guy who's in charge of that. So he's saying like, yo, y'all playing, but listen, we really don't know what that is. Like, I don't know why y'all played. That's crazy. So in the 1970s, the government started declassifying UFO documents under a Freedom of Information Act request. The resulting information stoked the public interest. Non-governmental scientists and civilians stepped up to investigate, filling the vacuum left by the government. The civilian response invalidated the government's fear that the public couldn't handle the truth about these sightings, whatever it turned out to be. Perhaps the government projected its fear of admitting it didn't have the answer. I think that's the main thing. You know, saying you don't know sometimes makes people uncomfortable. But it's like, that's easy. right? That's the simplest thing you could do. Just say, yo, we don't know. But obviously, when you think people are supposed to look for you for all the answers, then it's impossible for you to come to that adult decision to say, "Oh, you don't." It's probably not dangerous though, right? It hasn't attacked us yet, so that's not funny at all. Um, so, but not all governments have so little faith in their citizens. According to the documentary, UFOs have been spotted in 133 countries, and many governments actively encourage people to report sightings so that they can properly be investigated. Most of these countries don't classify that information either. For example, in 2007, France, which has a government agency specifically devoted to UFO studies, published over 50 years worth of files on a website, which it keeps updating. Oh, cool. And I guess maybe we'll check that out in one of these videos. In 1978, a French government UFO study, that focused on 11 particularly compelling cases, concluded that in 10 of them, witnesses observed a, quote, material phenomenon that could not be explained as a natural phenomenon or a human device, close quote. In 1999, France released a detailed report of UFO investigations that acknowledges the credibility of witnesses despite the, quote, fear of appearing ridiculous, alienated, or simply gullible. That report concludes that most of the cases cannot be attributed to human technology, and thus, quote, we are forced to resort to other hypotheses that can neither be confirmed nor invalidated, such as the hypothesis that of extraterrestrial visitors. Right, so they're not saying it's that, but we can't just say that it's not that because we don't know, So in a documentary, Keene expresses awe at the idea that this report wasn't a bigger deal, and she muses about what would have happened if something like it had been published in the U.S. But if the U.S. government refused to admit what it didn't know, it certainly didn't want to admit that some of the unidentified objects might be of alien origin, or they just didn't want to, say that. Oh, some of that stuff that you're saying that you didn't know, yeah, that was our stuff. Don't worry about it. Hold it down. Hold it down, but I'm checking back there. So, if that were true, that would mean humans aren't alone, and that we aren't at the top of the cosmic food chain. Which, come on, if there is a cosmic food chain, that don't make no sense. Why would we be anywhere towards the top if there was such thing as that phrase, cosmic food chain? That would be ridiculous. That means there were other things on that food chain. This weekend's event raised the possibility yet again, especially because the pilots who saw the UFO couldn't figure out how it was flying, given they saw no, quote, identifiable propulsion system. Countries such as Costa Rica, Chile, and Peru study UFOs without classifying the info. Keene chalks up the difference to quote, the size and strength of the U.S. military and the associated higher risk or higher stakes for a world superpower. By comparison, UFO investigation units in smaller countries work very differently. Quote, Chile's investigation unit is amazing, Keene said. Quote, they're not trying to hide anything. It's accepted that these things are out there. The reports were always made public. Keene stopped short of suggesting that UFOs have cosmic origins, but the possibility can be ruled out by her, by investigating scientists or by the government, especially because no human-created aircraft has ever publicly documented can fly or maneuver at speeds close to those of the UFOs documented by witnesses. So she's not saying that is that. She's just saying, hey, none of our stuff does that, and there's no evidence of anybody having, machines or airplanes, aircraft, or birds or whatever else you want to call that can fly like that. How they can fly without no visible or explainable propulsion system, which makes sense. So the secrecy, as well as the obfuscation, and stigmatization employed by the U.S. government both sabotage true scientific investigations and, according to Keene, quote, provoked conspiratorial thinking. Exactly. You're saying, oh, it's not nothing. It's like, no. Well, it must be something. If you say it's nothing, now I don't believe you. So now I got to make my own decisions. You know, it makes sense. Destigmatizing something is more difficult than stigmatizing it, of course. The recent report recommendation for, quote, more coordinated UFO efforts resulting in greater attribution to UFOs or of UFOs is easier said than done. But the government is moving in the right direction, particularly with the recent establishment of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Keene is hopeful that the existence and work of the AARO will further destigmatize reports. Quote, every publication and report does this little by little, she said. Despite increased governmental transparency and coordination, challenges remain. It's now the public that has that to filter out bias and stigma. What? It's now the public has that. It's now the public has that to filter out bias and stigma. That's particularly true of the scientific community, which has, quote, been among the last groups to overcome the stigma. Because once they get told something, they think, oh, that's true. Let's not even try to argue it no more because we already agree that it's true. But they're being lied to the whole time. So now they have to overcome their own internal biasness to, make sense. It makes sense, but it still sucks. So perhaps that's a result of scientific skepticism, or perhaps it's because, as Keene puts it, many scientists are, quote, off at university siloed. Exactly. They're on their own little echo chamber, rather than seeing these phenomena or interacting with witnesses who have, which I think will be better. The government created a monster with its handling of the UFO issues. The bias and shame surrounding 50 years worth of UFO sightings in the U.S. reinforces the need for the public to think critically rather than succumbing to what Keene called the, quote, purely irrationality of the stigma. It also underscores how misinformation or disinformation starts at the top and filters down through the public until it takes on a life of its own. I mean, we see that with many things in this world, right? At this time, where the government says something and some people believe it and some people don't believe it, and then that filters and goes down into society many different ways, and by the time it finds itself back into, quote unquote, the public light, it's completely different, and it's sometimes it's crazy, but then it's like some parts of it is true. So it's very understandable that once you start a stigma like that, it's hard to get off of it. So what do you think, man? When leave comments below and let me know what you think, because this is it's an interesting time in world history.